How a Mossad woman killed the man she loved to save a nation. The gun felt heavier than it had during training, during the 100 operations before this one, during every moment of her life, except now. Leora stood in the hotel room in Vienna with the curtains drawn and the city lights bleeding through the fabric, and she watched Daniel sleep, the rise and fall of his chest, the way his hand rested against the pillow where her head had been 30 minutes ago. The suppressor was already attached. The shot would be clean. She had perhaps 90 seconds before he sensed her absence and woke, and in those 90 seconds, she would either pull the trigger or throw away everything she'd sworn to protect. Wait, before the next operation begins, if this mission already pulled you into the shadows, tell us where you're watching from. To stay inside the next secret, betrayal, or act of justice, subscribe and join the agency. Eyes open, back to the mission. 3 months earlier, Tel Aviv had been burning under August heat when Leora Navon walked into the operations briefing on the 7th floor of headquarters. The room smelled like stale coffee and the particular tension that comes before someone's life changes without their knowledge. Avi Rotam sat at the head of the table, older now, gray threading through what had been black hair when Leora first met him 12 years ago during her recruitment. He didn't look at her when she entered. That was the first sign. "Close the door," he said. She did. There were no files on the table. That was the second sign. "How's your German?" Abby asked. "Fluent, you know that. And your cover as an art historian?" "Maintained for 6 years, never burned." Leora sat down across from him, hands folded. "What is this?" Abby finally looked at her. His eyes carried something she'd seen before in handlers who were about to ask the impossible. "We have a problem in Vienna. A leak." Someone inside the Austrian intelligence service has been feeding classified NATO communications to an intermediary. We don't know who the intermediary works for yet. Could be Moscow, could be Tehran, could be someone we haven't identified. But the leak has already cost us 2 assets in Eastern Europe and compromised a joint operation with the Americans. So plug it. Send someone from the European desk. The leak is careful. No digital footprint we can trace. Old-school tradecraft. Dead drops, brief encounters, cash transactions. We need someone on the inside. Someone who can get close. Leora felt the temperature in the room shift. Close to whom? Avi slid a photograph across the table. The man in the image was perhaps 40, handsome in an understated way, with dark hair and the kind of face that suggested intelligence without arrogance. He wore a casual sweater and was caught mid-laugh at what looked like a cafe terrace. Daniel Falk, Austrian citizen, born in Salzburg, educated at the University of Vienna, art dealer specializing in 20th century European works, travels frequently, Prague, Budapest, Berlin, Paris, has connections in academic circles, cultural institutions, private collections, and 3 of his trips in the past 6 months correlate exactly with verified intelligence leaks. He was in Prague 2 days before our asset there went dark. He was in Budapest the week before a safe house was compromised. The pattern is consistent. Leora studied the photograph. Daniel Falk didn't look like a spy, but then neither did she. "You want me to get close to an art dealer?" "We want you to become part of his life. Use your cover. You're Dr. Leora Navon, art historian specializing in Central European modernism. You're in Vienna doing research for a publication on the influence of the succession movement. You frequent the same galleries, the same academic circles. You meet him. You let him meet you." And then? And then you find out what he knows, who he's working for, and what he's planning to pass next. We need to know the entire network before we shut it down. If we move too early, the real players disappear, and we're back to zero. Leora set the photograph down. Timeline? Open-ended, however long it takes. You'll have a handler in Vienna. Rafi Shemesh, you've worked with him before. He'll maintain distance but provide support. Your cover is deep enough to withstand scrutiny. You leave in 4 days. She looked at the photograph again. Daniel Falk's smile seemed genuine, the kind that reached the eyes. "Anything else I should know?" Avi hesitated. He's not married, no long-term relationships that we can verify. He keeps his personal life compartmentalized, which could mean he's protecting something or someone. Be careful. I'm always careful. Be more careful than that. Avi stood, signaling the briefing was over. "This one matters, Leora. If the leak continues, we lose our operational capability in Central Europe. People die. Do you understand? I understand. But she didn't, not really, not yet. Understanding came later, in ways she never anticipated. Vienna in September was a city of ghosts and elegance, where centuries of empire still whispered from the architecture, and the coffee houses smelled like history. Leora's apartment was in the 7th district, a modest 2-room flat with windows overlooking a quiet street lined with lime trees. She'd spent the first week establishing her routine: mornings at the university library, afternoons at galleries and archives, evenings at readings or small cultural events where academics and art enthusiasts gathered. She'd seen Daniel Falk twice before they spoke. The first time was at the Belvedere, where she was genuinely absorbed in studying Klimt's final works.
He'd been standing near the bride, hands in his pockets, observing the painting with the quiet intensity of someone who understood what they were seeing. The second time was at a lecture on Egon Schiele at the Academy of Fine Arts. He sat 3 rows ahead of her and asked a question during the Q&A that revealed both knowledge and genuine curiosity. The third time was not an accident. Leora had learned that Daniel frequented a small gallery in the 1st district called Raum für Kunst, a space that featured both established and emerging artists working in the tradition of Viennese modernism. She arrived on a Friday evening during an opening reception, dressed simply but well, her dark hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. The room was crowded with the usual mix: collectors, artists, hangers-on, and people who came for the free wine and conversation. She was examining a series of ink drawings when she heard his voice behind her. "They're better than they first appear." Leora turned. Daniel Falk stood close enough to be conversational, but not intrusive, holding a glass of white wine and looking at the same drawings she'd been studying. Up close, he was more striking than his photograph suggested. There was warmth in his eyes and a slight scar above his left eyebrow that the surveillance photos hadn't captured. "You think so?" she asked in German, her accent flawless. The artist is playing with negative space in a way that references Schiele, but subverts the erotic tension. It's more about absence than presence. What we don't see matters more than what we do. Leora smiled slightly. That's either very profound or very pretentious. He laughed, and it was the same laugh from the photograph. "Probably both. I'm Daniel." "Leora." They shook hands. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Are you a collector?" he asked. "Historian. I'm here doing research on the secession movement. And you?" "Dealer."
I work with private collectors and institutions, mostly 20th century pieces. Are you at the university? Visiting scholar. I'm based in Jerusalem, but spending the semester here. Something flickered in his eyes when she mentioned Jerusalem. Interest, perhaps, or caution. It passed quickly. Then you're far from home. How are you finding Vienna? Beautiful, melancholic, a city that remembers everything. That's the curse and the charm, Daniel said. Would you like to get a coffee? There's a place nearby that's much quieter than this. Leora pretended to consider. I should stay for the artist's talk. It's not for another hour. We have time. She let herself be convinced. The cafe was called Sperl, an old establishment with worn marble tables and the kind of waiters who'd seen generations of Viennese life unfold. They sat by the window and ordered melange and sacher torte, and for the next hour Leora played the role she'd been trained to play: interested but not eager, knowledgeable but not showy, present but with boundaries. Daniel was easy to talk to. He asked good questions and listened to the answers. He spoke about art with genuine passion, but without the pretension that often accompanied the trade. He mentioned a recent acquisition, a small Kokoschka sketch, and the challenge of authenticating works in an era of increasingly sophisticated forgeries. The provenance is everything, he said. A painting is only valuable if you can trace its history, prove it is what it claims to be. Otherwise, it's just canvas and pigment. The same is true for people, Leora said quietly. Daniel looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. Is it? I think people are harder to authenticate. We carry so many versions of ourselves. Which version are you? He smiled. The one sitting across from you. Which are you? The same, she lied. When they parted that evening, Daniel asked if he could see her again. Leora said yes, but made him work for it. She gave him her university email, not her phone number, and suggested they might cross paths at the Sheila exhibition opening at the Leopold Museum the following week. "I'll be there," he said. She knew he would be. That night, Leora met Rafi Shemesh in a parking garage near the Prater. Rafi was in his 50s, built like a boxer gone soft, with eyes that missed nothing. He'd been running operations in Europe for 20 years and had the scars, physical and otherwise, to prove it. "How'd it go?" he asked, leaning against a concrete pillar. "First contact established. He's intelligent, careful, personable. I don't have a read yet on whether he's what we think he is. They never look like what they are. That's the point." Rafi lit a cigarette, the orange glow illuminating his face briefly. "You need to move faster. We're getting signals that another leak is imminent, something big. If Falk is the conduit, we need to know before it happens. I can't rush this. If I push too hard, he'll sense something's wrong. I'm not asking you to seduce him in a week. I'm asking you to create enough access that we can monitor his movements and communications. Can you do that?" Leora thought about Daniel's eyes, the way he'd looked at the paintings, the genuine quality of his interest in her work. "I can do that." "Good. Next check-in is in 5 days unless something urgent develops. Use the usual protocols." Rafi dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his shoe, then walked to his car without looking back. Leora stood alone in the garage, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade, and wondered, not for the first time, what it cost to live in the spaces between truth and necessity. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt almost ordinary. Leora and Daniel saw each other with increasing frequency: coffee at Spurl, lunch at the Noshmarkt, evenings at gallery openings and lectures. He introduced her to his circle: other dealers, curators, collectors, academics. She introduced him to her fabricated research, her invented colleagues back in Jerusalem, her carefully constructed life. And somewhere in the midst of the performance, something unexpected happened. She began to like him. It was a problem. Daniel was not what she'd expected. He was thoughtful and funny, self-deprecating without being insecure, passionate about his work without being consumed by it. He cooked well. She discovered this when he invited her to his apartment for dinner and prepared a perfect risotto with saffron and asparagus. He read widely, not just about art, but literature and history and philosophy. He asked about her family, her childhood, her dreams, and listened to her lies as though they were the most important truths in the world. And she found herself, against every instinct and training, wanting to tell him the truth. The surveillance had revealed little. Daniel's apartment was clean. No hidden documents, no encrypted communications, no unusual contact patterns. His phone calls were mundane, mostly business-related. His travel was consistent with his work as a dealer. If he was the leak, he was better than anyone expected. Or he wasn't the leak at all. Leora raised this possibility with Rafi during their third meeting, this time in a rented room above a Turkish restaurant in the 16th district. "What if we're wrong about him?" she said. Rafi looked at her with the patience of someone who'd heard this before. "We're not wrong. The pattern is too clean." Pattern isn't proof. Correlation isn't causation. Maybe he's just unlucky with his timing. "You're compromised." It wasn't a question. Leora felt heat rise in her face. "I'm being objective. We've had eyes on him for 6 weeks and found nothing. No contacts, no suspicious behavior, no—" "Because you're not looking hard enough, or because you don't want to find it." Rafi leaned forward. "Let me be clear. Tel Aviv has intercept data showing another leak is coming. The timeline matches Falk's upcoming trip to Prague next week. If you can't maintain operational discipline, I'll pull you out and send someone who can." "I'm maintaining discipline." "Then prove it. Get closer. Access his communications, his contacts, his plans, whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Leora repeated quietly. Rafi softened slightly. "I know this is difficult. It's supposed to be. But remember why you're here. Remember what happens if we fail." She remembered. She always remembered. That was part of the problem. That weekend, Daniel invited Leora to accompany him to Salzburg. He had business there, a collector interested in a Klimt landscape, and thought she might enjoy seeing Mozart's birthplace and the fortress overlooking the city. It was the kind of invitation that suggested their relationship was moving beyond professional courtesy into something more personal. Leora accepted. They drove through the Austrian countryside in Daniel's vintage Mercedes, the autumn landscape rolling past in shades of gold and amber. Daniel played Schubert on the stereo and talked about his childhood in Salzburg, his father who'd been a music teacher, his mother who died when he was 16. The grief in his voice when he spoke of her was real and raw, even after so many years. "I'm sorry," Leora said. "It was a long time ago. But you don't stop missing someone just because time passes." He glanced at her. "Have you lost anyone?" Leora thought of the true answer: the assets who'd died, the operations that had failed, the colleagues who'd been killed in the line of duty. "My grandfather," she said instead, which was also true. "He raised me after my parents divorced. He taught me to see the world as a puzzle, where every piece mattered. He sounds wise." He was. He said the hardest thing in life is knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel. "And have you figured that out?" "And still learning." In Salzburg, they checked into separate rooms at a small hotel near the Mirabel Gardens. The meeting with the collector took place that afternoon in a private viewing room at a gallery in the Old Town. Leora accompanied Daniel, playing the role of expert consultant, and watched as he negotiated with the kind of patience and skill that suggested years of practice. The collector was Austrian aristocracy, old money and older prejudices, and Daniel navigated both with grace. After the meeting, successful, a sale agreed upon pending final authentication, they walked through the gardens as evening settled into the city. The fortress glowed amber in the dying light, and the river rushed past with the sound of time moving forward. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said. "It helps to have someone who understands the work." "I enjoyed it. You're good at what you do." "So are you." He stopped walking and turned to face her. The air between them had changed, become charged with something unspoken. "Leora, I need to tell you something." Her heart rate increased. "What?" "I haven't been entirely honest with you." Every nerve in her body went alert. Her hand moved instinctively toward her bag, where her phone and other tools were concealed. "About what?" Daniel smiled, and it was self-conscious, almost shy. "About my interest in your work. I didn't meet you by accident at that gallery. I'd seen you at the Belvedere and the lecture at the Academy, and I wanted to talk to you. So I went to the gallery opening because I knew you'd be there. I'm sorry for the deception." The relief and disappointment hit Leora simultaneously. "That's your confession? You engineered our meeting?" "I know it sounds manipulative. It sounds human. People do that. It's okay." "Is it?" Daniel looked at her with an intensity that made it difficult to hold his gaze. "Because I think I'm falling for you, and I need to know if that's completely one-sided or if there's any possibility." Leora kissed him before he could finish the sentence. It was partly to stop him from saying more, partly because she wanted to, and partly because she needed to maintain the operation. But when his arms came around her, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that felt like truth, she forgot for a moment which reason mattered most. They made love that night in Leora's room, with the window open and the sound of the river below, and the fortress watching over them like a stone witness. Daniel was gentle and present, and afterward he held her as though she were something precious that might break if he let go. Leora lay awake long after he'd fallen asleep, listening to his breathing and feeling the weight of her betrayal settle over her like a shroud. She thought about reaching for her phone, sending the coded message to Rafi that would indicate progress in the operation. But instead, she watched Daniel sleep and wondered what it would be like to be the person he thought she was, Dr. Leora Navan, art historian, someone whose biggest deception was orchestrating a meeting at a gallery opening. At 3 in the morning, Daniel stirred and pulled her closer. "You're thinking too much," he murmured. "I can feel it." "How do you know?" "Your body is here, but your mind is somewhere else. Where are you?" "Trying to figure out what this is." "Does it need to be figured out right now? Can't it just be what it is?" Leora turned to face him in the darkness. "And what is it?" "Something good. Something I didn't expect." He kissed her forehead. "Is that enough?" "For tonight," she whispered. But she knew it wouldn't be enough for tomorrow. They returned to Vienna on Sunday evening, and the next morning Leora met Rafi in a different location, a bench in the Volksgarten, surrounded by late roses and the sound of children playing nearby. "You slept with him," Rafi said without preamble. Leora didn't ask how he knew. Surveillance was thorough. "Yes." "And?" And nothing. He's a civilian, a good man. I don't think he's our leak. Rafi lit a cigarette, his movements precise. Tel Aviv disagrees. They've intercepted another communication that correlates with Falk's movements. He's traveling to Prague in 3 days. Whatever he's passing is happening then. Let me come with him. No, we need you here to search his apartment while he's away. We have a 72-hour window to find hard evidence, documents, communications, anything that proves his connection to the leak. That's breaking and entering, if he discovers it. He won't. You'll be careful. You're always careful. Rafi looked at her directly. Unless you can't do this anymore. Tell me now if you're compromised. Leora thought about Daniel's hands on her skin, his whispered confession in Salzburg, the way he'd looked at her in the morning light as though she were the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I can do it. Then do it. And Leora, when we confirm what he is, you'll need to be prepared for what comes next. We can't let this leak continue. Do you understand? I understand. But understanding and accepting were different things. Daniel left for Prague on Thursday morning. Leora saw him off at his apartment, kissing him goodbye and promising to have dinner ready when he returned on Saturday. She waited 2 hours after his departure, then used the key he'd given her, a gesture of trust that made her stomach turn, to enter his apartment. The space was exactly as she remembered it, elegant but lived in, filled with art and books and the accumulated evidence of a life fully inhabited. Leora moved through the rooms methodically, her training overriding her guilt. She checked desk drawers, file cabinets, shelves, anywhere documents might be hidden. She found business correspondence, gallery receipts, authentication certificates, personal letters from friends and family. Nothing suspicious, nothing incriminating. His computer required a password. She had tools for that, provided by the technical team in Tel Aviv. It took 40 minutes to bypass his security, and then she was in. Email, business correspondence, personal messages, nothing encrypted or suspicious. Documents, contracts, inventories, research files on various artists. Photos, gallery openings, trips, meals with friends. Photos of her from the past month, candid shots he'd taken when she wasn't looking, always smiling or absorbed in looking at art. She appeared happy in these photos, almost real. Leora spent 6 hours searching and found nothing that suggested Daniel Falk was anything other than what he claimed to be, an art dealer who loved his work and had fallen for a woman who was lying to him about everything. She was about to leave when she noticed a small leather journal on the bedside table, half hidden under a novel. She'd seen it before but hadn't thought to examine it closely. Now she picked it up and flipped through the pages. It was a diary, handwritten in German, entries dating back several years. The writing was personal, introspective, the kind of private thoughts people commit to paper when they need to organize their feelings. Leora read quickly, skimming for anything operational. Most of it was mundane, thoughts on art, reflections on loneliness, descriptions of places he'd visited. Then she found entries from the past 2 months. September 18, saw her again today at the gallery. Something about the way she looks at paintings, like she's searching for something hidden beneath the surface. I want to know what she's searching for. September 22, coffee at Sparrow. She's brilliant and guarded in equal measure. I catch glimpses of someone underneath the careful presentation, someone with depth and possibly pain. I want to know her. I want her to know me. October 10, Salzburg. I told her the truth about arranging our meeting. She didn't run. We made love, and it felt like finally coming home after years of wandering. But she holds something back. There's a distance in her eyes sometimes, like she's calculating something I can't see. I tell myself I'm imagining it. October 15th. She has nightmares. She doesn't talk about them, but I hear her sometimes in the night, speaking words I don't understand. Hebrew, maybe? I wonder what she's running from. I wonder if I should ask, or if some questions destroy the answer. Leora closed the journal, her hand shaking. Daniel knew, or suspected, or sensed something was wrong, but loved her anyway. She put the journal back exactly where she'd found it and left the apartment,
locking the door behind her with the key that now felt like a weapon in her hand. That night, she called Rafi from a secure line. "I searched the apartment. There's nothing, no evidence of any intelligence activity." "Then we're missing something. The leak is real, Leora. The timing is too precise. Maybe he's not aware he's being used. Maybe someone else is exploiting his movements, his contacts, his access without his knowledge." Rafi was silent for a long moment. "That's possible, but it doesn't change the fact that he's the common denominator. We need to know who he's meeting in Prague and what's being passed. I'm sending someone to shadow him there." "Who?" "You don't need to know that. Your job is to maintain your cover and be ready for whatever we learn. Can you do that?" "Yes." She hung up and sat in her dark apartment, staring at nothing. Outside, Vienna continued its elegant existence, oblivious to the small betrayals being committed in its shadows. Daniel returned from Prague on Saturday evening, smiling and carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. He kissed Leora when she opened the door and handed her the package. "For you," he said.
Inside was a small print, a Chile sketch of a woman's face, delicate and haunting. "I saw it in a gallery in Prague and thought of you," Daniel said. "The way she's looking at something beyond the frame, like she's searching for something just out of reach. It reminded me of how you look at art sometimes." Leora felt something crack inside her. "It's beautiful. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He pulled her close. "I missed you." 3 days felt like forever. They had dinner, the meal Leora had promised to prepare, and talked about his trip. He mentioned meetings with collectors, a gallery owner he'd known for years, a concert he'd attended at the Rudolfinum. Everything sounded normal, routine, exactly what it should be. After dinner, they made love, and afterward Daniel fell asleep with his arm around her waist. Leora lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the phone to vibrate with the message from Rafi about what surveillance had discovered in Prague. The message came at 2 in the morning. No contact. Target maintained normal schedule. Meeting with gallery owner confirmed legitimate. No dead drops, no suspicious encounters. Returning Vienna. Leora read the message 3 times, her mind racing. If Daniel hadn't passed anything in Prague, then either he was better at tradecraft than anyone suspected, or he wasn't the leak at all. Or the leak was about to happen in a way no one had anticipated. The answer came 48 hours later. Leora was at the university library when Rafi called on her secure phone. His voice was tight. "We have a problem. Critical intelligence was passed 2 hours ago. Details of a joint operation in Syria that could get our people killed. The leak happened here in Vienna, not Prague." "How do you know?" "Because the information was passed through a dead drop at the Central Friedhof. We have surveillance footage. A man approached a specific grave, left something inside a flower arrangement, and departed."
30 minutes later, a woman retrieved the package. "Did you identify them?" "The woman is known to us, Russian intelligence, operating under diplomatic cover. The man—" Rafi paused. "We got a partial facial recognition match." Leora's blood went cold. "Daniel?" "We're not certain. The quality isn't perfect, and he's wearing a hat and glasses. But the build, the gait, the timing, it fits. He visited the cemetery this morning, said he was paying respects to a composer's grave for research." "Did he tell you he was going?" "No." Leora's mind raced through the past few days. Daniel had seemed normal, relaxed, happy. No signs of stress or unusual behavior. "Are you sure the footage shows him?" "Sure enough that Tel Aviv is ordering immediate action. They want him brought in for questioning, tonight." "Rafi, wait. If we bring him in and he's not the leak, we burn the operation and alert whoever is actually responsible. Let me talk to him first. Let me—" "There's no time. If the information he passed makes it to Damascus, our assets are dead. We're moving in 3 hours. You need to be clear of his apartment by then." "I'm supposed to see him tonight. He's cooking dinner." "Then cancel. Make an excuse. This is over, Leora. I'm sorry." The call ended. Leora sat in the silent library, surrounded by books and the accumulated knowledge of centuries, and felt the full weight of what was about to happen. If Daniel was the leak, everything between them had been a lie. His feelings, his vulnerability, his trust. She had been played by someone better at the game than she was. If he wasn't the leak, she was about to destroy an innocent man's life because she'd done her job too well. gotten too close, and now couldn't see clearly enough to know the truth. There was a third possibility, one that had been growing in her mind since she'd read his journal. Daniel knew exactly who she was, and had been playing a different game entirely.
She thought about canceling dinner, disappearing, letting the arrest happen without being present for it. But something, duty, love, or the need to know the truth, drove her to his apartment that evening at the appointed time. Daniel greeted her at the door with a kiss and a glass of wine. He was making pasta carbonara, he said, and had bought a bottle of Austrian white that he thought she'd like. The apartment smelled like garlic and herbs and domestic comfort. They ate dinner at the small table by the window, talking about nothing and everything. Daniel mentioned a potential acquisition, a small Klimt drawing, and asked about her research. Leora answered automatically, her mind tracking the time. Rafi and his team would be moving soon, probably within the hour. She thought about canceling dinner, disappearing, letting the arrest happen without being present for it. But something, duty, love, or the need to know the truth, drove her to his apartment that evening at the appointed time. Daniel greeted her at the door with a kiss and a glass of wine. He was making pasta carbonara, he said, and had bought a bottle of Austrian white that he thought she'd like. The apartment smelled like garlic and herbs and domestic comfort. They ate dinner at the small table by the window, talking about nothing and everything. Daniel mentioned a potential acquisition, a small Klimt drawing, and asked about her research. Leora answered automatically, her mind tracking the time. Rafi and his team would be moving soon, probably within the hour. After dinner, Daniel poured more wine and led her to the sofa. He sat close, his hand finding hers. "I need to tell you something," he said. Leora's pulse quickened. "What?" "I've been thinking about the future, about us. I know we've only known each other a few months, but this feels different from anything I've experienced before. You feel different, essential somehow." He turned to face her fully. "I'm falling in love with you, Leora. I think I have been since that first night at Sparrow, and I need to know if there's any possibility that you feel the same." The timing was cruel and perfect. Leora looked into Daniel's eyes, kind, open, vulnerable, and saw everything she wanted and everything she was about to destroy. "I do," she heard herself say. "I feel the same." Daniel's smile was radiant and heartbreaking. He kissed her gently, and when he pulled back, he was still smiling. "Then I have something to ask you. Will you?" The door burst open with the sound of splintering wood. 4 men in tactical gear flooded into the apartment, weapons raised, shouting commands in German and Hebrew. Daniel was on the floor in seconds, hands behind his back, someone's knee in his spine. He didn't fight. He didn't resist. He simply turned his head to look at Leora, and in his eyes she saw shock, betrayal, and the terrible recognition of truth. "Leora?" His voice was confused, pleading. "What's happening? What's—" One of the tactical team, Rafi, she realized, grabbed her arm. "Let's go, now." But Leora couldn't move. She stood frozen, watching Daniel being searched, his apartment being torn apart, his life being systematically dismantled. He kept looking at her, kept saying her name, kept asking what was happening. Finally, Rafi physically pulled her from the apartment. In the hallway, away from Daniel's line of sight, he shook her roughly. "Get it together. You're blown. We need to extract you immediately." Did you find—" "We found a locked box in his bedroom with a false bottom. Documents inside, communications. He's been passing intelligence for months, maybe years. You were right about one thing. He's better at this than we thought. Much better." The world tilted. Leora felt her legs weaken. "No, that's not— I searched his apartment. There was nothing." "Then he moved it, or added it recently. It doesn't matter. We have him. You're done here." But she wasn't done. None of them were. The interrogation took place in a safe house on the outskirts of Vienna, a nondescript building that had seen too many versions of this same scene. Leora wasn't supposed to be there. She'd been ordered to stand down, to let the professionals handle the extraction of intelligence. But she'd insisted, and Avi had allowed it, perhaps sensing she needed to see this through to the end. She watched through one-way glass as Rafi questioned Daniel. He sat at a metal table, still wearing the sweater he'd worn at dinner, his hands cuffed in front of him. His face was pale but composed. "Tell us who you're working for," Rafi said, not asking,
ordering, "I don't know what you're talking about." "We found the documents, Daniel, the communications, the evidence of intelligence transfers."
We know you've been passing classified NATO information to a Russian intermediary. What we don't know is why. Money? Ideology? Something else? Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then, "I want to speak to Leora." "That's not how this works." "Then I have nothing to say." Rafi looked toward the glass, toward where he knew Leora was standing. She saw the question in his expression. She shook her head. But Avi, standing beside her, opened the door. "5 minutes," he said. "That's all." Leora entered the interrogation room alone. Daniel looked up when she walked in, and the expression on his face was worse than anger or betrayal. It was disappointment, as though she'd confirmed something he desperately hoped wasn't true. "So it was all an operation," he said quietly. "Everything. The research, the galleries, Salzburg. Us. You were sent to get close to me." Leora sat down across him. Every instinct told her to maintain distance, to stay in role, to extract whatever information she could and walk away. But looking at Daniel now, she found she couldn't sustain the lie anymore. "Yes," she said. "I was sent to determine if you were the source of intelligence leaks, to find out who you were working for and what you were planning to pass next." "And did you find out?" "No. Not until tonight. I searched your apartment. I found nothing. Because there was nothing to find." Daniel leaned forward as much as the paths allowed. "Leora, I'm not a spy. I'm not working for anyone. I'm an art dealer who fell in love with a woman who apparently doesn't exist." "Then explain the documents Rafi found, the box with the false bottom." "I don't know what he's talking about. I don't have a box like that. I don't have any documents except business records and personal correspondence. Someone planted it. Or," he stopped, his eyes widening slightly, "or you did." The accusation hung in the air between them like smoke. "I didn't," Leora said. "I swear to you, I didn't plant anything."
"Then why should I believe anything you say? You've been lying to me from the beginning. Your name, your work, your interest in me, it was all false. How do I know this isn't just another layer of the operation?" "Because I'm telling you the truth now." "Now?" Daniel repeated bitterly. "Now that you have me in handcuffs in a room I'll probably never leave? Very generous." Leora felt something inside her break. "I didn't want this. Any of this. I was assigned a mission. I followed orders. And yes, getting close to you was part of that mission. But what happened between us?" She stopped, unable to continue. "What? What happened between us, Leora? If that's even your real name." "It is. My real name. And what happened between us was real. For me. I know you have no reason to believe that, but it's true." Daniel was quiet, studying her face. Finally, "Did you read my journal?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes, when I searched your apartment." "Then you know how I felt, how I feel. That wasn't fake, Leora. I meant every word I wrote, every word I said to you." "I know. Then help me. If you believe I'm innocent, if any part of what we had was real to you, help me prove it. Because right now I'm facing charges of espionage based on evidence I've never seen, for crimes I didn't commit. And the only person who might believe me is the one who was sent to destroy me." Leora looked at the man across from her, brilliant, kind, and completely trapped, and made a decision that would change everything. "I'll help you," she said, "but you need to tell me everything, every detail. Who you've met, where you've been, any unusual contacts or requests, anything that might explain how someone could be using you without your knowledge." Over the next 2 hours, Daniel talked and Leora listened. He described his business operations in detail, the galleries he worked with, the collectors he represented, the authentication process for acquiring new pieces.
He mentioned a dealer in Prague named Martin Kozak, someone he'd known for 15 years and trusted implicitly. He talked about a private collector in Budapest who'd recently become a client, a wealthy Russian businessman named Viktor Volkov, who was building a collection of Central European modernist works. When he mentioned Volkov, something clicked in Leora's mind. "Tell me more about Volkov. When did you start working with him?"
About 8 months ago, he approached me through a mutual contact in the art world. Very wealthy, very knowledgeable about art, very private. Most of our business is conducted through intermediaries. Have you met him in person? Twice, once in Vienna, once in Prague. When in Prague? Daniel thought. The first time was in March. The second was last week, when I was there for business. Leora's pulse quickened. The timeline matched the intelligence leaks. What did you discuss with him? Art, potential acquisitions. He's particularly interested in Klimt and Sheila. He wanted me to source several pieces for his collection. Did you give him anything? Documents, files, information about provenances? Of course, that's part of authentication. I provided detailed documentation on the pieces I was proposing, provenance records, exhibition histories, expert assessments. In what format? Digital files, mostly, sent via encrypted email to protect the information, some hard copies for particularly sensitive pieces. Leora stood abruptly. I need to see your communications with Volkov. Every email, every file you sent, every record of your interactions. Why? What does this have to do with? Because I think Viktor Volkov is using you as an unwitting courier. I think he's hiding intelligence in your authentication documents, using your legitimate business communications to pass classified information. You are the cover, Daniel. You're not the leak. You are the pipeline.
Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes, followed immediately by horror. Oh God, How is that possible? I would have noticed. Steganography, Leora said. Hidden data embedded in image files or documents. You wouldn't see it without the right software. To you and anyone else examining your files, they'd look like normal business documents. But to someone with the decryption key, they'd contain whatever intelligence was being passed. She left the room and found Rafi and Avi in the observation area. They'd heard everything through the audio feed. We need his computer and his communications with Viktor Volkov immediately, Leora said. And we need to identify who Volkov really is and who he's working for. Avi nodded slowly. If you're right, this changes everything. Falk isn't an agent, he's an asset who doesn't know he's being exploited. But that doesn't explain the box with documents that was found in his apartment. Because someone planted it, Leora said. Someone who wanted to make sure that when we finally found the leak, the trail ended with Daniel instead of continuing to the real operators. Someone who knew we were investigating and decided to sacrifice Daniel to protect the actual network. Who would know about our investigation? Rafi asked. The three of them looked at each other, and the implications settled over them like winter frost. We have a mole, Avi said quietly. Someone inside our operation who's been feeding information to whoever is running this network. Someone who knew about Leora's assignment, about the surveillance on Falk, about the timing of our actions, and who knew Daniel would be at the cemetery this morning, Leora added. Who knew his schedule well enough to time the dead drop for when he'd be in the area, creating the video evidence that would seal the case against him. Rafi's face had gone pale. The surveillance team, the technical analysts, the handlers, any of them could have access to that information.
Not any of them, Avi said grimly. Someone senior enough to have oversight of the entire operation. Someone who's been in this long enough to build trust and exploit it. They spent the next 6 hours tearing apart the operation from the inside. Technical teams analyzed Daniel's computer and found exactly what Leora had suspected. Steganographic data hidden in dozens of files he'd sent to Viktor Volkov over the past 8 months. The hidden information included classified NATO communications, intelligence assessments, and operational details that matched the leaked material perfectly. Viktor Volkov turned out to be a cover identity for a Russian intelligence officer named Dmitry Sokolov, operating in Vienna under diplomatic protection. He was known to Israeli and Western intelligence agencies as a skilled handler who specialized in unwitting asset recruitment. But the mole was harder to find. It took cross-referencing every person who'd had access to the operation details with travel records, financial transactions, and communication patterns. The list narrowed slowly, painfully. Finally, at 4 in the morning, the technical team found an anomaly. Encrypted communications sent from a secure device registered to a senior operations officer to an unknown recipient using a sophisticated relay system designed to obscure the final destination. The device belonged to Yonatan Katz, a 20-year veteran of the Mossad who'd been part of the European Operations Directorate for the past decade. He'd been one of the planners for Leora's assignment. He'd had access to all surveillance reports. He'd known every move they'd made. And he'd been feeding information to Sokolov for the past 3 years. The arrest happened at dawn. Katz was in his apartment in Tel Aviv when they came for him, sleeping peacefully, apparently confident that his carefully constructed deception would hold.
He didn't resist. He didn't even seem surprised.
The interrogation revealed a classic pattern of recruitment and exploitation. Financial pressure from a failing marriage and mounting debts, followed by a casual approach from someone who seemed to offer a solution, followed by the slow accumulation of compromises until turning back became impossible. "I never meant for it to go this far," Kat said during his confession, recorded and witnessed. "It started small. Just minor information. Nothing critical. But they always wanted more. And by the time I understood what I'd become, it was too late to stop. The intelligence you passed got people killed," Avi said, his voice cold with controlled fury. "Our assets, our partners, people with families who trusted us to protect them. I know. I'll carry that for the rest of my life, however long that is." "Why Daniel Falk? Why did you plant the evidence in his apartment?" Katz looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Because Sokolov told me to. When your investigation started getting close to the real network, they needed a scapegoat. Falk was perfect. His legitimate business contacts, his travel patterns, his relationship with Navone. It all fit too well. The plan was to let you find him, let him take the fall and close the case. Everyone would think the leak was plugged and the real operation could continue. And Navone? What was supposed to happen to her? She was supposed to be reassigned after Falk's arrest. Standard protocol. She'd done her job. She'd never know the truth. But she did know the truth now. All of it." Leora stood in the observation room, watching Katz confess to the crimes that had nearly destroyed an innocent man and had betrayed everything they'd all sworn to protect. She felt numb, hollowed out, as though all the lies and deceptions of the past months had carved away something essential and left only the shell of who she'd been. Avi joined her, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "Falk is being released. Full apology, compensation, whatever he wants. It won't undo the damage, but it's what we can offer. Does he know the truth about how he was used? We've briefed him. He's processing it. He wants to see you." "I don't think that's a good idea. He was insistent. I think you owe him that, at least." Leora closed her eyes. "I owe him a lot more than that." They met in a different room, one without handcuffs or guards or one-way glass, just 2 chairs and the weight of everything that had passed between them. Daniel looked tired, but no longer broken. He'd had time to absorb the truth, to understand that he'd been a pawn in a game he'd never known he was playing. "They told me what happened," he said when Leora entered. "About the mole, about Sokolov, about how I was used to pass intelligence without knowing it. It's surreal, like something from a film." "I'm sorry," Leora said, and the words felt completely inadequate. "I'm sorry for lying to you, for invading your life, for everything." "Were you lying? About all of it?" She sat down, maintaining distance between them. "In the beginning, yes. It was an assignment. I was supposed to get close to you, to determine if you were the leak. I did what I was trained to do. And later? Later, it became more complicated. The things I told you about my work were false. The life I described was fabricated. But the way I felt when we were together, that was real. The connection, the conversations, the moments we shared, those weren't part of the operation. Those were just us." Daniel was quiet, processing. "I wrote in my journal that I thought you were hiding something. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my own fears of abandonment onto you. Turns out my instincts were right. I'm sorry." "You keep saying that. What are you sorry for exactly? For doing your job? For protecting your country? For caring about me despite orders not to? For hurting you?" "For making you think you could trust me and then betraying that trust. For," her voice caught, "for falling in love with you when I knew it could only end one way." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "You're in love with me? It doesn't matter. It can't matter. What we had was built on deception. There's no foundation to build on." "Maybe. Or maybe we build a new foundation. With truth this time." Leora shook her head. Daniel, I can't. My life is classified. My work is classified. I can't tell you where I'll be tomorrow or next week or next year. I can't promise you honesty because most of what I do requires lies, and you deserve better than that. You deserve someone who can be fully present, fully truthful, fully yours. I can't be that person. What if I don't want someone else? What if I want you exactly as you are, with all the complications and impossibilities? Then you're a fool. Probably. He smiled, and it was sad and knowing. But I've spent my whole life being careful, being measured, being alone, because it was safer than risking the kind of hurt that comes from opening yourself to another person. And then you walked into that gallery, and everything changed. I felt alive for the first time in years. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what it costs to find that and then let it go? I do understand, because I feel it too. But understanding doesn't change reality. I've been recalled to Tel Aviv. My cover is blown. I can't stay in Vienna. Can't maintain contact with anyone from this operation, including you, especially you. What if I came to Tel Aviv? And do what? Sell art to Israeli collectors while waiting for me to come home from operations I can't tell you about? Wonder every time I leave if I'm coming back. That's not a life. That's waiting for a tragedy. Every relationship is waiting for a tragedy if you think about it that way. We're all going to lose each other eventually.
The question is whether the time we have together is worth the pain of losing it. Leora felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I can't answer that question, not for you. Then I will. It's worth it. Whatever time we can have, the question is whether the time we have together is worth the pain of losing it. Leora felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I can't answer that question, not for you. Then I will. It's worth it. Whatever time we can have, whatever form it takes, it's worth it to me. Is it worth it to you? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to reach across the space between them and take his hand and tell him they'd find a way, somehow, to make it work. But she'd spent her entire adult life choosing duty over desire, country over self, and she didn't know how to make a different choice. I don't know, she said finally. I genuinely don't know. Daniel stood up. Then I'll wait until you do, however long it takes, because some things are worth waiting for. He left the room without looking back, and Leora sat alone in the aftermath of confession and possibility, feeling the weight of a choice she hadn't yet made. 3 weeks later, Leora was back in Tel Aviv, working from a desk on the 7th floor and trying to readjust to a life that no longer included Vienna or Daniel or the person she'd been when she was pretending to be someone else. Yonatan Kotz was awaiting trial for espionage. The network he'd been part of was being systematically dismantled across Europe. The intelligence he'd leaked was being assessed for damage, and new protocols were being implemented to prevent similar breaches. And Daniel Falk had returned to Vienna, to his apartment and his gallery and his life, with the knowledge that nothing would ever be quite the same. Leora had received one message from him, sent through secure channels with the full knowledge and approval of her supervisors. It was brief. Still waiting. No expiration date on the offer. D. She hadn't responded.
She told herself it was because she didn't know what to say, but the truth was that she was afraid. Afraid of wanting something she couldn't have. Afraid of choosing herself over duty. Afraid of being someone other than who she'd been trained to be. Avi found her in the archives one afternoon, studying old mission reports and trying to find some kind of precedent for the situation she was in. "You're looking in the wrong place," he said, sitting down across from her. "What's the right place?" "There isn't one. Some situations don't have precedents. They just have decisions." Leora closed the file. "You're here to tell me what to decide. I'm here to tell you that you have a choice. That's more than most people in this organization ever get. Don't waste it by being too afraid to make it. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you live with it, like everyone else. Avi stood up. For what it's worth, I've known you for 12 years. I've watched you become one of the best field operatives we have. You've never failed a mission, never compromised your principles, never given less than everything to this work. But I've also watched you become lonelier, more isolated, more disconnected from anything that might make you happy. And I wonder if that's really what we're asking of you, or if we're just asking what you're willing to give, and you've decided that has to be everything. What are you saying? I'm saying that loving someone doesn't make you less effective at your job. It makes you more human. And more human means more capable of understanding the stakes of what we do, who we're protecting, and why it matters. Think about it. He left her alone with the files and the silence and the question that had no protocol to answer it. That night, Leora made a phone call. Daniel answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. Leora? It's me. Are you okay? Is something wrong? No. Yes. I don't know. She took a breath. I've been thinking about what you said. About some things being worth the wait, worth the risk. And I think you might be right. I think maybe I've spent so long protecting everyone else that I forgot to protect the parts of myself that make life worth living. I think maybe I've been afraid of the wrong things. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what this looks like. I can't promise you normal or safe or easy. My work will always be complicated. There will be things I can't tell you, places I have to go, silences you'll have to endure. But if you're willing to accept that, if you still think it's worth it, then I want to try. I'm willing. I've been willing since Salzburg. Then I need you to understand something. This won't be a relationship like other people have. There will be rules, boundaries, security protocols. It won't always feel fair or balanced, and there may come a time when I have to choose between you and the mission, and I can't promise which choice I'll make. I understand all of that, and I still choose you. Do you choose me? Leora looked out the window at Tel Aviv at night, the city lights spreading out like possibilities. Yes, I choose you. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go. They talked for another hour, making tentative plans for how to navigate a relationship that existed in the margins of secrecy and duty. Daniel would visit Tel Aviv when she was there. She would find time to visit Vienna when operations allowed. They would communicate through secure channels and build trust slowly, carefully, with full awareness of the challenges ahead. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even work. But for the first time in her career, Leora felt like she was choosing life instead of just surviving it. 6 months later, Leora stood in Vienna again, this time openly as herself. Not an art historian, not undercover, just Leora Navan, intelligence officer on approved leave, visiting the man she loved.
Daniel met her at the airport with flowers and a smile that suggested she'd barely believed she'd actually come. They drove to his apartment through the city she'd learned to navigate in the shadows, and this time she saw it in daylight, real and present, and hers to experience without deception. That evening, they walked through the Volksgarten, past the roses that were blooming again after winter, and Daniel took her hand. I have something to ask you, he said, something I was going to ask you the night they arrested me. Leora felt her heart rate increase. What? Will you marry me? Not today, not next month, maybe not even next year, but someday, when the timing is right and we've built enough trust to sustain it. Will you marry me? She thought about all the reasons to say no, the complications, the security concerns, the impossibility of planning a future in her line of work. She thought about the training that had taught her to never make promises she couldn't keep. And then she thought about Daniel reading her his journal entries, about making love in Salzburg with the fortress watching, about the choice to be human in a profession that often demanded otherwise. Yes, she said, someday, when the timing is right. They sealed it with a kiss under the late roses, in a garden that had witnessed 100 years of romance and loss, and the stubborn persistence of hope. The proposal ring came 6 months after that, during a quiet dinner at Sparrow, the cafe where they'd first sat together and pretended to be people they weren't. This time they were exactly who they were, and it was enough.
The wedding happened a year later, a small ceremony in Jerusalem with only close friends and family. Avi gave her away. Rafi attended and cried, which no one had thought possible. Daniel's best man was Martin Kozak from Prague, who made a speech about love being the greatest authentication of all. They honeymooned in Greece, in a villa overlooking the sea, and for 2 weeks, Leora turned off her phone and let the world save itself without her. It wouldn't last. It couldn't last. She'd be called back to duty, to operations and missions and the necessary deceptions of her work. There would be nights when she couldn't say where she'd been, mornings when she'd leave before dawn, and Daniel would have to trust she'd come back. But they'd found something more valuable than certainty. They'd found choice. The choice to build a life in the spaces between duty and desire, to honor both without sacrificing either completely, to be human in a world that often demanded otherwise. Years later, when people asked Leora how she'd made it work, the career, the marriage, the impossible balance, she'd think about that hotel room in Vienna, the weight of the gun in her hand, the 90 seconds when she'd had to choose between the man she loved and the nation she'd sworn to protect. The truth was that she'd never made that choice, not really, because in the end, loving Daniel didn't compromise her duty, it completed it. It reminded her why the work mattered, what she was protecting, who she was fighting for. It reminded her that being a spy didn't mean being less than human. Sometimes it meant being more human than you'd ever been before, with all the joy and terror that came with it. She kept the gun from that night in Vienna, locked in a safe she never opened but never forgot. It was a reminder of the choice she didn't make, the trigger she didn't pull, the moment when love and duty converged, and somehow, impossibly, both survived. Daniel never asked about the gun, or the cases she worked, or the nightmares that occasionally woke her in the middle of the night. He simply held her when she needed holding, and gave her space when she needed space, and built a life beside her that allowed for secrets without demanding all of them. It wasn't perfect. Some nights were harder than others. Some operations took her away for weeks, and she'd come back changed in ways she couldn't articulate. Some truths remained buried because they had to be. But on quiet Sunday mornings in their apartment in Tel Aviv, when Daniel made coffee and they read the papers together in companionable silence, Leora felt something she'd never expected to feel. Peace. Not the peace of safety or certainty or a life without danger, but the peace of knowing she'd chosen authenticity over armor, connection over isolation, love over the easier path of loneliness. She thought about Yonatan Katz sometimes, rotting in a prison cell for crimes committed in service of debts and desperation. She wondered if he'd had someone like Daniel, someone who might have pulled him back from the edge before the fall became irreversible. She thought about all the operations she'd run, the assets she'd recruited, the intelligence she'd gathered, and she realized that the most dangerous thing in their profession wasn't betrayal or capture or even death. It was forgetting why any of it mattered in the first place. 20 years into her career, Leora trained new recruits at the academy. She taught them tradecraft and protocols and the necessary skills of deception. But she also taught them something else, something that wasn't in any manual or training guide. Remember, she'd tell them on their last day, the lies you tell in service of your country are necessary, but don't let them become the only truth you know. Find something real. Find someone real. Hold on to it. Because the moment you forget what it feels like to be human is the moment you become dangerous, not to your enemies, but to yourself. They'd nod and take notes and think they understood. They wouldn't, not really, not until they'd spent years in the field and felt the slow erosion of self that came from living in the margins between truth and fiction. But maybe one or two would remember when the time came. Maybe one or two would make the choice she'd made, would find the balance she'd found, would discover that duty and love weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. On her 50th birthday, Daniel gave her a painting, a small watercolor of the Volksgarten roses in bloom. He'd commissioned it from a young Viennese artist, someone he'd mentored, and it captured the light and shadow of the garden where they'd walked on that day when everything changed. "To remind you," he said, "of the moment we chose each other." Leora hung it in her office at headquarters, where it lived among the maps and secure phones and classified documents. Her colleagues never asked about it, but she suspected they knew. They always knew more than they said. Avi retired the following year, and at his farewell dinner, he pulled Leora aside. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said. "That operation in Vienna, the one with Falk, I had my doubts. I thought you'd gotten too close, that you'd lost perspective. I almost pulled you out. Why didn't you? Because I realized that maybe getting close was exactly what the operation needed. Not the professional distance we usually maintain, but actual human connection. That's what allowed you to see the truth when everyone else, including me, was ready to settle for the convenient lie. I got lucky. No, you were brave. There's a difference." He raised his glass. "To bravery, and to knowing when the rules need to be broken." They drank to that, to the complicated truths that couldn't fit in protocols, to the lives saved by choosing humanity over efficiency. The years accumulated like rain, slow, steady, shaping everything they touched. Leora ran operations across 3 continents. Daniel built his gallery into one of the most respected in Central Europe. They had good years and hard years, quiet years and years that tested every promise they'd made. They never had children. It was a choice they made together, knowing that Leora's work couldn't accommodate that kind of vulnerability, that kind of permanent investment in the future. Some people judged them for it. Others understood. But they built a different kind of legacy. In the operatives Leora trained, in the artists Daniel supported, in the quiet acts of protection and creation that defined their lives. And when Leora finally retired at 58, with a career that had spanned 4 decades and more operations than she could count, she came home to Daniel in the apartment they'd shared for 30 years and felt, for the first time, the full weight of what they'd built together. "No regrets?" he asked that first morning of her retirement as they sat on the balcony watching Tel Aviv wake up. Leora thought about the question. She thought about the operations that had haunted her, the assets she'd lost, the choices that still kept her awake some nights. She thought about the years of secrets and silence, the distance that duty had required, the price they'd both paid for loving each other across the boundaries of classified and civilian life. "Regrets, yes," she said finally. "But not about you. Never about you." Daniel took her hand. "Then we did all right. We did better than all right." They sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the city, over the country they'd both served in different ways, over the life they'd built against all probability and protocol. Somewhere in Vienna, in a hotel room that had long since been renovated and rented to other guests, the ghost of a younger Leora still stood with a gun in her hand and 90 seconds to decide. But that decision had been made decades ago, and its echoes had shaped everything that followed. She hadn't pulled the trigger. She'd chosen love. And in choosing love, she'd learned what duty really meant. Not the absence of connection, but its deepest expression. The weapon in the safe remains a reminder.
Not of what she'd almost done, but of what she'd chosen instead. Not of death, but of life. Not of ending, but of beginning. And every time she thought about that night in Vienna, she didn't think about the weight of the gun or the 90 seconds of choice. She thought about Daniel sleeping in the next room, unaware of how close he'd come to the abyss. She thought about waking him with a kiss instead of a bullet. She thought about mercy.